Hi, this is Mike Williams. We've done a little bit with the term the Scriptures. It's a very powerful thing to look into. If the Scriptures are that important, don't you think it would be important to know what the Scriptures are? Well, Jesus determined what the Scriptures were. All of the writers of the New Testament agreed with Jesus as to what the Scriptures were. So when do we look at the New Testament, and how do you decide what to believe when you're reading the New Testament if it is not Scripture? Is that what you're saying, Mike Williams, that the New Testament is not Scripture? I'm saying emphatically the New Testament is not Scripture. To embrace that, you're embracing Catholic tradition, not what Jesus had to say, nor are you embracing what the Old Covenant had to say, nor are you embracing what all of Jesus' disciples agreed as to what the Scriptures were. You're going totally with Catholic tradition, who canonized the New Testament, and they called it Scripture. Jesus never called it Scripture. None of the disciples ever called it Scripture. None of the writers of the New Testament ever called it Scripture. You know, a lot of times I'm accused of picking and choosing what parts of the Bible or the New Testament that I agree with. And you know what? The accusation is absolutely true. The fact of it is, all of my accusers do the same thing. They just don't admit it. They dismiss Paul's teachings right and left. They totally disqualify the issue of the first and the last Adam, that by one man sin came into the world and all were condemned, and by one man's obedience righteousness came into the world and all were made righteous. They totally dismiss that. What do they dismiss it for? For the writings of James. Now, the issue is not whether I agree with James or Paul or Peter or John or any of the writers of the New Testament. The issue is which one of the writers agree with the Scriptures. You see, it doesn't make any difference whether it's me saying it, whether it's Paul saying it, whether it's a pastor standing in a pulpit. You see, the requirement upon the people and the right of the people of this planet is to go to the Scriptures to see whether or not these things are true. Now, if you go and you try to find a place where that Scripture was going to be fulfilled, or prophecy was going to be fulfilled in some segmented way, you're just not going to find it. You're going to find that the prophets were talking about the day of the Lord, the day of the cross, a specific time when all things would be fulfilled in the body of one man. You're going to find that this was the reality that was given to these people, and they understood that. You see, you have the issue where Paul is talking about that it's not by works whatsoever. And Paul talks about that in Romans chapter 1. He uses 3 examples and refers to Abraham as one of the examples. And then you have in James chapter 2, James making reference to the very same verses and saying, "Thou, O man, who says that it's not by works, I believe it's by works," and gives the very same example. So what do I do with that? Paul says in Romans 4 that it's not by works. James says in James chapter 2 it is by works. But you see, the thing of it is that they both give the same scriptural reference. So what do I do? What you should do and everyone else does. Go back and read the story about Abraham and the sacrifice where God gave instruction to Abraham to sacrifice his son. You know what you're going to find out? James was wrong. The scriptures prove James was wrong and Paul was right. It is not by the works of man. This is the gift of God. It is no place in that story that brings out that this was by man's works and by man's performance, that it was totally the faith of God. This was faith in action, not any works involved whatsoever. You have to make a decision. Do you pick and choose? You better pick and choose, because you're going to wind up one confused Christian. If you don't realize that it is your job to go back to the Scriptures and decide not just whether what I say is correct or not, but to decide whether what anyone says, even if it is the writers of the New Testament. The Scriptures are powerful. They reveal the truth. I suggest you try them on for size. They're fantastic. If you want more information, go to gospelrevolution.com or just refer to the link below.